Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kathy Frankel. I'm the Vice President for Exhibitions and Collections at the Building Museum. Thanks so much for joining us as we celebrate the museum's 40th anniversary this week. This is our final program of the week. Thanks for sticking with us and joining us on a Friday afternoon. I hope this is a fun way to get a little sneak peek of what we're up to as you move into the weekend. On December 12, 1980, President Jimmy Carter signed Public Law 96515, which, among other things, established a National Museum of the Building Arts, whose home would be in the historic Pension Building. Over the ensuing years, the museum's mission evolved and expanded in scope and scale, but it has always been unique to serve the country's only cultural institution dedicated to the built environment. For 4 decades, we've presented celebrated exhibitions that have touched on everything from design and construction to advances in sustainability and resilience to social justice issues such as evictions. And I've been here for 20 of those 40 years. Our award-winning teen programs have engaged and empowered younger generations with the knowledge and tools to advocate for a better built world. And our prestigious public programs have allowed people to engage with world-famous designers, industry leaders, and other notables through a variety of formats. I want to give a special thank you to CoStar Group and all of our 40th anniversary donors for making this birthday week of free programming possible. It should also be noted that CoStar is a generous sponsor of the Visitor Center and is our technology partner on the project. We thank them and all of the generous donors who helped make this Visitor Center a reality. If you enjoy what you see today, please consider supporting the museum with a year-end gift. As a member, thank you for your support. It directly impacts our ability to create programs and exhibitions. And this holiday season, you can also gift a membership to someone you love. Visit our website, www.mbm.org, for more details. So as you can see from the screen here, this is going to be a different kind of program, much more informal, since we're all here together. So we are so grateful to our members and we so appreciate your feedback. So we want to hear from you as we present the sneak preview of the Visitor Center. So today you are one of the first outside of the museum staff to see the plans for our Visitor Center, which will open when the museum opens back up, hopefully early next year. I'm joined today by our amazing collaborator on this project, architect and exhibition designer, Wendy Evans Joseph. But before we get to Wendy's work, let me give you a little background. Given the complex nature of the exhibitions and stories that we tell about the built environment, we've been in conversation about the need to have a visitor center for more than a decade. We really want to provide an opportunity for our visitors to better understand what we do and how all of our exhibitions and programs connect to the broader built world. We were lucky enough to engage the talents of Studios Architecture to help us determine how our visitors move through the space and how that experience could be improved. Because of their work, the optimal space on the northwest side of the first floor was determined to be the right spot for our visitor center. Studios also helped us to upgrade our galleries with new systems, lightings, acoustics, electrical, flooring, giving Wendy a beautiful and functional canvas with which to work. The next step in the process was to create a welcoming space to both sell tickets as well as create an exhibition to help our visitors better understand who we are and what we do. And that's where Wendy Evans Joseph came in. We were looking for a collaborator who would help us before we even put a pen to paper on what this exhibition space might be. And Wendy did just that, and she did that masterfully for us. This was a really tough exhibition to do. Our content is infinite on talking about the built environment. So having Wendy come in and work with us on this space and help us figure out how we tell the stories that we try to tell in a lovely and efficient way was really essential as we started the project. So just so you have a sense, I know you all know our space well. This is obviously a plan of the Great Hall of the first floor. Those blue galleries on the top of the slide are where this visitor center will be. We have finished the ticketing gallery already. That was ready to go when we were supposed to open on March 13th, which is the same day that we closed because of the pandemic. And we are working to put the finishing touches on the 2 exhibition galleries in those contiguous 2 spaces. So Wendy, I think I will turn it over to you from here. And Wendy and I will do a little back and forth, and we look forward to hearing your questions when we get towards the end.
Great. Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you all for being here today and joining us for this sneak preview, a little behind the scenes of what it took to make the new visitor center. We've had a great experience this past year or so working with Kathy, museum team, with studios, who, as you know, has been the master planners for the building, and Blue Cadet, media designers, everyone. And we've been very fortunate also to work with some fabricators who, despite what's been going on with COVID, have worked really hard to create the displays, and so that we can finally, hoping to open in the beginning of next year. Studio Joseph's is a small architectural firm, and we are based in New York, and we're dedicated to community projects. So our emphasis and our focus of design is on learning. And we do this by designing buildings because we're architects, but we also work with museums and libraries, other institutions who want to bring people together around shared meaning, around learning. And so exhibition design and public space installations are all part of that. So when we're working with the building museum, we're not just working with a sort of a physical place. We're working with a place that's a reflection of their mission, of your mission, I should say. So it begins at the front door, and there are 4 front doors, and it's a magnificent building, overwhelmingly beautiful, big space, and overwhelmingly and often confusing space. So part of this effort is to sort of give you a sense of orientation, to make you feel at home, and some pragmatic things like, where do you get a ticket, and what's there to see here and do here, and who is the building museum anyway? And so that's what we're after. Now, one thing we do know is the building museum on a sort of from the outside is exciting and big, but it's made up of many different smaller cells. And so what we're trying to do is inhabit 3 of these cells that are adjacent to one of the front doors, and make a beautiful place there that will become the visitor center. So these are just, this is an abstract diagram. And what you might remember back when you were in the building, it has these rooms have these beautiful vaulted ceilings. And we want to bring back some of that feeling of the original architecture, because architecture and design is, of course, core to your mission. Next. So again, this is who we are, sorry. But when we started this project, we also, what we're trying to do is bring forward the mission of the museum and have a new place to describe that. But we wanted to also look a little more carefully at what the voice of the museum is. And so there was a little tweaking that went on. Kathy, do you want to talk a bit to your branding and what that meant?
Sure. So this logo, the logo on the left side, was developed probably about 12 years ago, updated a little bit from our original logo that had the outline of the entire building. Tried to clean it up and just use that roof line. But this was a great opportunity for us to tweak it a little bit more and bring it a little more contemporary. The color is tweaked a little bit. The typeface is tweaked, just to give it a little bit more of a purposeful and polished look to it, which we've really carried on throughout the galleries.
Right, so these are just some exciting colors that is sort of brighter and very much talk to today and today's sort of momentum. So again, back to the ground floor, and let's take a peek inside. So the 1, 2, 3 are literally the 1, 2, 3 of how you would move through the visitor center. 1 being the place where we say hello. Next. And so what we're trying to do here in gallery 1 is to say hello. You can buy a ticket, you can find out information, you can sit down and regroup. And you also get a hint of what the museum collects. So each of the galleries has its own purpose. The first one is really the beginning of your journey and talks about collections. What is there in the great archive? The second gallery is about larger, more broad-based themes about our planet, about our ecology, about how humans exist on our planet, with our planet, and what the effect is of our built environment on the way we live and on all living things. So it's very broad-based, and it also talks to urban structure. The third gallery, we rein it into very much a one-to-one experience, a sort of embodied architecture, in which we talk about the materiality and about how designers make choices for what it is that we create in order to have very specific effects. So let's start with gallery 1. Again, this is the overall plan, and in blue are these 3 spaces. When you walk in, and this is just a technical plan, but I did want to bring up the idea that these galleries with their beautiful vaults, what we tried to do is make a spatial arrangement that brings up that volume, that sense of place here. So again, collections, ticketing, and a place of repose. Next. Well, we started out by going through the archive, and I hope that someday there's a great members tour back there, because it is fantastic. Not only are there serious building parts and grills and this and that, and one-to-one scale, plaster models, paint chips, all kinds of things about the built environment, but there's also lots of toys. People love to play builder and make small buildings and make spaces and think about the environment. I think that's very much innate to who we all are. So we had a great time back there. And when it came down to it, and the museum said to us, well, what do you want to show? We're like, let's show it all. So in this small space, maybe we had to make some choices, but we wanted to be representative of what the collection is. Next. So we started studying things, and the way that a design process works is we start with sort of ideas and diagrams, and we work that through, and we talk about what the opportunities are. So we start with an idea of what we want to achieve and how to achieve it, and then we come back and forth. So we tried lots of different sketches. These are just a couple. These are renderings, not actual built places. And what we realized is that we wanted the objects that we were displaying to be the ones that generated the form. So we looked at a design that had large and small places to respond to the large and small items that are on display, which would be the one on the right. Next. So this is again a rendering showing how we could incorporate lots of different items into this wall. And the arches are a kind of a playful response to some of the arches of the architecture of the building. Again, it's not a mimic, but it's a response. Next. Question became how to make this. And I want to say that in all of our work with the Building Museum, it's a building museum, and that means it's beholden on us to build beautifully and to build properly. And so we count on working with fabricators who have that attention to detail that will allow us to do something that really is inventive and elegant. Now, in this case, we wanted to create a wall in which the wall itself didn't prevent you from seeing into it. We didn't want the window to have any presence. And so each one of these different little vitrines is all part of a network, and they're all shadow boxes, meaning there's a sort of curved, almost like a photographer's background, is seamless behind each object. So you never have that feeling of the corners. We look very carefully at the lighting, and I'm afraid this photo on the right sort of exaggerates the contrast here. It's actually quite subtle in reality. What would the lighting be? What should the color background be? And there's a fantastic little photo on your left, lower left, of Sam Morse, our fantastic fabricator, collaborator, holding a screw, because it's all about how are we assembling this? What is the detail? We wanted the glass to be exactly flush with the facade. This is something, and we've been in the exhibition design world a long time, that no one has ever achieved, this feeling of flushness, of clean lines that doesn't detract at all from what we're trying to display. Next. So this is just a detail. The photo on the left, this is the built room. It is the only room that is already so-called finished. And it gives you a feeling of what that might be like looking into the corner. And that would be the ticket desk, which is designed by studios on the left. Next. We also wanted people to understand what things are. So this isn't just meant to be a pretty picture. You can also avail yourself, you can't read this on the slide perhaps, but everyone would have a kind of in-place brochure, so you could look up and say, oh, what is that? What is that? And when is it from? What's the era? Who made it? So all of this information would be available to you. Next. And this is a view that is on through that arch, which has a blank panel in it now, is the view that shows the arch that takes you into Gallery 2, the next stop on your journey. So back to the plan, and I'd like to pass it back to you, Kathy, for a few minutes to talk about what it is we were trying to achieve from a content point of view in the second gallery.
Absolutely. So this gallery, in some ways, our inspiration for this gallery was some responses we got in sort of an earlier version, the earlier study we did about the visitor center, in as much as we had an evaluator go out and talk to our visitors that were coming through the front door and ask them what they understood about the built environment and how they understood it. And frankly, we were shocked. And since you are all members, so you understand what we do, you will be shocked as well at the number of people who said the built environment doesn't really impact me. So we're like, check, number one job that we have to do in this gallery is make people understand how they are impacted by the built environment and how they impact the built environment as well. Because we know in the museum world, sort of engaging people personally is really what you need to do to keep them coming back, to keep them interested, to educate them. So that was the effort that we have made in this gallery, to give us a basic definition of what is the built environment, and then talk about sort of how it affects us, how green space or no green space impacts us. We always talk about studies that have been done in hospitals of how much quicker patients, more quickly patients get better if they've got natural light in their rooms and they can open up the windows. And then how it affects society at large. There are inequities because of the built environment, and there have been people fighting against those inequities from the beginning. So really highlighting how you as a citizen can be involved in the decisions that get made, and how and what your built environment looks and feels like and how it behaves. So those are really lofty goals. This gallery is small-ish, and we need to get these messages across pretty succinctly and in multiple ways to our multiple different kinds of learners, which I'll turn it back over to Wendy because she came up with the solution for doing that.
Yeah, well, next, as Kathy said, boy, a lot to take on. A lot to take on with the ideas behind it, and a lot of scale to take on. Trying to understand things from a very personal level, as well as a community level, urban level, and of course, a global scale. So we kind of look across all of these, this spectrum. Next. So back to a small technical plan. Architects love to show plans, and if nothing else, take away from this room that there is a perimeter, and in the middle, we have a large table. Next. And the table is actually a wonderful device because, as all of you know, in Thanksgiving, maybe we didn't all sit together around a table, but a table is a place of gathering. It's a place of conversation. So in the middle of the room, we have this spot of gathering, and we talk to very specific issues about urban structure there. And on the perimeter, we have some large scale images that drive home the message of human impact on the environment, as well as a kind of continuous narrative that speaks to some of the more specific issues that Kathy brought up about how people heal, about how people relate to each other in the built environment. Next. And this is a view looking down into the gallery. This is at eye level, again, just a rendering of what we're trying to get at here. So you see in the middle, a series of skyline views of different cities, and I'll get back to that. You see a band in which you can really learn a lot about different instances in how the built environment works and what reactions are. 25% of the people in the world live in spaces that are in certain contexts, have a certain amount of resources not available to them. Other types of data. So this is a place, because it's a visitor center, you can walk in, you can get a quick feeling for things and keep going. We want people to go upstairs and see all the galleries and the other exhibitions. But if you come back, and if you're members, if you're local, come back again and again, because you can take a deeper dive and there's more information and more that you can unpack. Next. This table in the middle brings up different cities and collages those cities with the texture of the pedestrian experience of the map. Next. So we picked an initial group of 12 cities. We picked them for the diversity of scale. We picked them because of the different kinds of challenges that they face. Coastal cities facing rising tides. Cities of the South that are facing issues of global warming, fire, flooding. And of course, not all of this is bad news. What we're trying to do is talk about what do cities, how do they act, and what is their heart? What's at the heart of these different experiences? And how can we make comparisons and learn from one to the other? Next. We developed this table as a kind of technical device in which we've embedded media that can help us make these connections. So there's both interactive media and there's a kind of a playful bringing up of what cities are happening when, and what cities are involved in different dialogues, I would say. So next. And I show that just to remind you that this is a project under construction, and this is a project that is an invention for this particular experience. And we worked with the media designers, and I think that we didn't want it to be something that was all tech, but had more of a visceral, tactile quality to it. And it has this kind of both kind of fun and playful, and a little bit of what I would consider eighth grade robotics. There's color. And what's happening here, and it's not going to be quite so much of a party in reality. This is sort of speeded up as a test run. This is a mock-up we did in Philadelphia at Blue Cadet's warehouse. But the idea is that the different skylines light up in different ways and different colors to bring your attention to which cities are having a dialogue about different issues. And this is all linked to another part of a media interactive embedded into the table as well. So, and we think that this will be a way, again, of drawing your attention to scale and to content. Next. Okay, who's ready to go through the door into Gallery 3? Next. Kathy, I'm going to pass it back to you to give a little bit about the curatorial narrative.
Absolutely. So we felt really good about sort of tackling the big question of what is the built environment in that middle gallery. But we know that we are known for architecture and design, and this really tackles that a little bit more, but in a slightly different way than it would in an architecture center or MoMA or one of the other museums, really talking about innovation and design and the problem solving and the way designers end up with their finished product. So that's what we were looking for. So this is very different, and as much as we are not marching through time looking at famous buildings, though the famous buildings are in there, but they are in there through their materials, which we thought was a really interesting entrance into that space. So that's what we are attempting to do here. I think Wendy's done a wonderful job sort of taking this on because it's a complex subject matter. We're trying to do things a little bit differently. I saw sort of a question in the chat asking sort of, had we talked about doing an intro video? And indeed we did talk for a long time about this being an intro video, but decided that this entire experience needed to be different. Or what the stories we're trying to tell are so complex and so layered that I think sort of entering it this way between the two galleries really gives you a better sense of what we're trying to do at the museum. So we hope that's our plan. But Wendy, this was a tough gallery to tackle. I know in talking to you through this was hard for you all to tackle because this is your field of study. This is what you do. You know, it's one thing if you're going to a natural history museum and doing an intro gallery, but this is something that you eat sleep and breathe. So tackling it was especially challenging, which I loved hearing about from you.
Well, thanks. And I think that for those of you who haven't been involved in a design process, I would tell you that a lot of times what happens is institutions, they sit amongst themselves, they think of what they want, they test it out, they talk and talk and talk. And then when the time comes, they hire a designer and they hand us a piece of paper. Here's what we want. And while that seems like a method, it isn't really the best method. The best method for a project to move forward is to have a conversation, an ongoing conversation. And as Kathy says, well, maybe we're a little more involved than normally, because if we do an exhibition on underwater sea life, I don't have a whole lot to offer there. But if we do an exhibition on architecture and design, this is what drives us. This is at our core. So there were a lot of incredibly interesting discussions. And I will say that there were a lot of themes that we talked about and developed that we didn't manage to get into these 3 small rooms. So someday maybe there'll be 4, 5, and 6, but we'll see how that goes. In this gallery, we really wanted to drive down what a building and what the built environment feels like, the texture, the density, how impactful things are, and think about what that means to us and how those decisions get made. So what's the difference between living in a brick building or a straw building or a wood building or a concrete building? What does that mean? And what does that say about who we are, about our culture, about our environment? All of these things come together. Next. So again, the abstract plan, we are discussing this again through a perimeter experience and a central experience in the middle. The table in the middle this time is a conversation about real things at 1-to-1 scale, actual pieces of building infrastructure. Next. Now, the idea of a sort of collage diorama seemed to be overwhelming, but we wanted to understand things at true scale, 1-to-1 scale. So we spent a long time thinking about different buildings, actually from all over the world. It's a global research project. Over time, things that were built back into much earlier times. I think we go back into about turn of the century, 1900, through today. You might notice the furthest to the right in the rear of the rendering, and this is just a rendering, is a piece of the grill work from the new African American History Museum in DC. Because we see it from afar, but how big is it really? What is it like? And so we wanted to take that into consideration. We wanted to see the scale of something like this next to the scale of typical brickwork or next to the scale of stone or wood, so that you can start to see these things together. Now, we did have to make a decision about what would be the way of expressing this in the room. And we realized that if we used actual materials, that you'd come in, you'd see the materials, and it would be a kind of a foregone conclusion. But if we abstract those materials, then you start to think to yourself, why did they use metal? Why are they using brick? What is the quality of that? What's the scale? What's the texture? And so it strips away the realism and allows you to sort of think a little harder about what that means. Now, towards the center of the room, we have a table with the actual material samples that you can touch. A tactile experience is very accessible for everyone, and they're sort of part of learning. Next. So how does this play out? Again, we talk about the conversations. Which buildings, if you do a worldwide search, would you pick? And our intention was to do things where we could both examine the reasons why designers use the materials they do, but also to compare those decisions one to the other. So one architect's use of brick for a specific reason is not the same as another. One might be using it for its incremental nature, One might be using it for the overall possibilities of what it would mean to configure things in brick. So one example would be Jefferson's Serpentine Wall, which used the brick in a single width, but got the wall to stand up because it was curving, and so it had inherent structural stability. So there are all kinds of things we can learn about that and cause us to think about what we see a little more deeply. Next. So again, this is just the type of exploration. This is the example that I showed you just before, David Adja's building. So we take a piece of the screen, we take that dimension, and we study it hard, and we recreate that. Next. Or another example, this is from Louis Sullivan, who worked in Terra Cotta. These things are magnificent, and you always want to go up and kind of do a rubbing. So what does that texture mean? Next. I love this one. This is an Alvar Aalto project, a house, and it is constructed as a study in brick itself. So what he did was he used bricks from different sites, different projects that he had. He had them all sort of delivered to his home site, and then played with them in a composition to understand what it meant to hold a brick vertically, hold a brick horizontally, bonding patterns, textural ways of working with the surface. So it became its own mock-up for future projects. And how exciting is that? Next. So here's another rendering of what this will be like. It's currently under in fabrication. We have a kind of a linear element, which will have more explanation in it. So you can do a deeper dive. You can find out more. You can find out things. And there are just sort of embedded in that a few samples as well of actual materials. Next. Now, part of making this was very much an invention. We're using a digital routing technique so that all of these are done with a very specific type of program that we're working with, so that we can adjust the sort of the sculptural quality of it. And then we started studying what is the finish, because from the beginning, we knew we didn't want it to have that feeling of sort of like dipped in chocolate. It shouldn't feel scaleless. It should have some kind of weight to it, some kind of textural quality. So we started looking at Zolatone, which is a product, but essentially has the feeling of being airbrushed. And we started looking very carefully at the size of the paint. Now I'm looking at Kathy and I'm about to start laughing how many of these we went through, how big are the individual points, what is the exact color, how many colors are involved, how black and white do we want it to be, how much do we want it to have some spark. We want it to read as light and bright, but still have a sense of gravitas, not mimic any other material like terrazzo or concrete. So we went back and forth. Next, many finish tests. And again, this is all just part of any design process. Again, this is what we would do if we were building a building, not just an exhibit about building a building. These are some shots in the fabricator's shop right now as he's starting to put some of these together. And we've been troubleshooting, again, some issues and how that works between the painting and the carving back and forth for so many different textures. Next, this is New Projects. They're a great outfit in Brooklyn. And one of the few places that has the capacity to do this. These panels are quite high. Even though the rooms aren't that big in plan, they're very gracious in their volume. So we're taking these panels all the way up to the vault. And this is the material table right now, just a render, of course. We're very excited about this. And one thing about this table that we like too is it'll be easy to switch out. So we want this visitor center to have a continuous life. Some things are somewhat evergreen, but other things we want to be able to change to have something special happens. A new building is built nearby and is using something super interesting. Let's get a piece of it. Let's show it to our visitors. Let's engage in a conversation. Let's get those designers in. So there's a linkage between what we're doing here and potential programming, and how that could spill out again into the galleries upstairs, where there's a never-ending series of fantastic shows going on all the time on so many different topics. So again, we're not trying to be a microcosm of everything. What we're trying to do is take a few very representative issues and dig deeply into those, with the hope of inspiring you to look further and to come further and to come again. And I think that's it. Next. Yeah, so this is our summary. It's going 1, 2, 3, and the sort of because that is the path of travel. It's not your typical narrative. But it's just a summary here of what we've been trying to achieve. So next, I want to say thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wendy. This is really great to get a preview, even though I am knee deep in this right now. It's sort of always fun to look at it again and sort of hear your words about it. And I really do think sort of our goal of really building the visual vocabulary for our visitors so they understand better what we do. You've really I believe you've hit the nail on the head with this. And it really is an exquisite space. I have been known to sort of hang out in the ticketing space during COVID a couple of times because it's so beautiful and it's so comfortable. And I really think it's going to change that visitor experience, which is what we're looking to do. That was what studios, their plan from the beginning was really to improve that visitor experience. And this is a wonderful first step towards that. So, and to all of you members out there, I see a lot of familiar faces and names, and sad we're not seeing you at a holiday party or in the shop or sort of in the Great Hall over the holidays. So thank you so much for coming on a Friday afternoon, and happy holidays to all of you. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Kathy.
weekend, everybody.
Thank you.